Heinlein novel, Time Enough for Love. This one, it's a little controversial. It was controversial in its day. I think it's still kind of controversial because it deals with subjects that you don't expect from a science fiction novel, and you certainly don't expect from Robert Heinlein, at least not at the time it was first published. And if you only know Heinlein's early works like I did until this year, it's very different, but it's brilliant. That's kind of a summation of what this video is going to say. Summation of the story. Well, summation of the book. First of all, this is a first edition. This was published in 1973. It followed up I Will Fear No Evil, which followed up The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress I reviewed in April. And that was a brilliant novel. It was a Hugo winning novel, and a lot of critics thought it was Heinlein's best. So far I think I have to agree, but this one comes close. It's a massive novel, 600 pages, one of the longest novels I've ever read. And it's about Lazarus Long, who we previously met in Methuselah's Children. He's still alive, very much older. He's 2,000 years old now. And he wants to die. But the leader of what's come of the Howard family 2,000 years down the line doesn't want him to die, wants him to tell his story, tell about his life, relate all the things that he's seen in 2,000 years. So he convinces Lazarus Long to keep going and tell his stories. And at that point, the book becomes kind of like a 1001 Nights, where Lazarus Long is telling stories from different periods of his life, but you don't get as many as you get from Scheherazade. The stories are longer. You only get a handful of stories, and then you come to the present day, and well, the stories are all kind of themed around love and sex. And how, first of all, how sex can change with the technology. If you're living for 2,000 years and you're part of this family that wants to maintain its gene pool because its gene pool is so unique among human beings, you end up with some inbreeding. You end up with some incest going on. And Lazarus Long is the oldest of everyone in the Howard family, and so everybody wants his genetics. All the women want to have babies by him because they think that their children will inherit his especially unique trait of living longer than everybody else. And I think that's what you could point out as the weakness of the novel, is that in order to do this, Heinlein basically turns all his women characters into nymphomaniacs, which is a little ridiculous, especially from today's perspective. So that's the number one weakness. But if Heinlein would have, I mean, it's a 600-page book as it is. If Heinlein would have taken the time to develop relationships the way they would really develop in the real world, and taken the time to really show these women as more than just somebody who wants to jump into bed right away, this thing would have been 5 times as long. So I want to say that Heinlein avoided going there simply to keep on track with his message of exploring, and he really does explore sex and love from a more, not really scientific, but definitely science fictional vantage point. a vantage point where it's more analyzed than romantic. And that too kind of removes the personality from the characters. They're a little more clinical, a little more analytical, a little more scientific. There are sections of the book that do avoid that, though. There are sections of the book which are very touching, and there are characters of the book that are very memorable. For me, the most memorable was the talking mule. Forget his exact name. I want to say Butch, but I think that's wrong. I read this as part of Samantha's Bound and Tagged, part of her book club on Facebook. The people in her book club voted for this book for the month of May, so I read it as part of that. And I talked a lot with Samantha about the book while we were reading it. And her favorite character was Minerva, which is an AI computer, not too different from Mike, except this one's female. And as an AI, her character was a lot cooler, less personable. But there's a twist to the book that then made her more human, which is what Samantha really loved about that character. I don't know, I still like the talking mule. Just the idea of throwing something so wacky in there and then making it a hero in the story was really good. And that whole section of the book where Lazarus Long is actually in a decent marriage with a woman for her entire life was the most touching, the most human, the most developed as far as the character personalities in the whole book. And it was a huge section of the book. It was really good. This is a book that was surprising. It's not like anything else I've read by Heinlein. It's not like any other science fiction book I've ever read. I don't have anything to compare it to. You know, it deals with some very taboo sexual subjects, and yet it's not smut. It's not pornography. Like I say, it deals with in a more, not totally clinical, but a more analytical way. You know, so it doesn't come across as a Harlequin romance. Sorry, Samantha. But that means it has less feeling to it and more rationality. And throughout the book, Heinlein does these quotes from Lazarus Long, which are brilliant, which also possibly reveals a lot of Heinlein's own philosophy and politics. And in those, it's interesting, earlier books I've read by him, I've been commenting how I don't see the right-wing libertarianism that people talk about so much. In this one, you start to see it more. So maybe he went through a change that took him in that direction. I'm not sure. I'm not his biographer, and I never met the man. I'm just trying to puzzle it out, and it does seem like here he is more right-wing, but it's still not what you see today. It's still kind of a common sense sort of thing that by today's politics would be neither right-wing nor left-wing, just in favor of individualism, in favor of freedom, in favor of the ideals that the United States of America has stood for from the very beginning. And I can get behind that. And so I absolutely love this book. Once again, Emily didn't read it, so I can't call it a top tale yet. But I'm going to twist her arm and get her to... I don't think she'll like it, because she's too much the feminist for this book. And the women characters are just too too much of a joke through a lot of it for someone who's a staunch feminist to really get behind. So, but I'm sorry, I see it a little differently. I see it from a different perspective, and I don't think Heinlein was purposely leaving his I think he was purposely writing the characters that way, but it's not because I don't think it's because he thinks women are all like that. I think he knew better, but he needed to do that to make the point in his narrative. And I don't think he could have really made the book if he would have gone in so much more detail to give all these different female characters that kind of depth. So I loved it. I was blown away. I really love this book. And it's controversial or not, hate it or love it, I think it's worth reading if you care about science fiction and want to know more about the history of the genre. Time Enough for Love is a landmark in that history. You just got to remember it was published at a time when the sexual revolution was happening. You know, before the sexual revolution of the late 60s, early 70s, women weren't supposed to like sex. And what was happening at that time is a lot of people, including women, were standing up and saying, hey, wait a minute, that's wrong. We do like sex. We do, you know, we want it in a proper way, but we do enjoy it. And so Heinlein was exploring all those taboos and all those stupid ideas from our past and making the point that, well, he says it instead of, I forget the exact quote, something, I put it on our Facebook page, something to the effect that you can't just work all the time, you have to make time enough for love. And, you know, I think he really is trying to send the message here that love is what makes life bearable. Without it, you just haven't got anything. And so I really, really, really like this book because of all those things. And they're strong enough for me that I can overlook the weaknesses of this book and call it one of the greatest science fiction novels of all time. Still not better than The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Mike is still the best character to date that I've read in Heinlein books. So that's all for this one. Till next time. We do have Bones and Keeps coming up. I moved this one forward for personal reasons. I just wanted to release it on Friday, the June 11th. And so Bones and Keeps will be next week as this video is released. It's already shot. I just got to finish editing it. And so I'll see you then with Emily, as promised. Bye.